Hey, what's going on there, folks? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good in between. It's the Earthmaster here on this Sunday, end of the weekend, about 11:48 a.m. here, California time, December 17th, 2023. 3.9 earthquake, the latest on the globe, and also here on the map. There's that 3.9 out around Manatone, Texas. Actually, this is needs to be updated around the White Cities, New Mexico area, where they've been keeping the majority of these earthquake locations at. But technically, it is in the state of Texas, outside of Pecos, Texas, here in the oil fields, out in the desert. Got quite a bit of earthquake activity ramping up here. There's some of those wastewater disposal facilities and ponds. That's what you're seeing here in the little squares out there. Again, out there in the oil fields of Texas, earthquake activity taking place here. One little earthquake back prior to the Cascadia mega thrust area. Pretty scary word, and no doubt this is a scary place. Very capable of producing a 9.0 earthquake or greater. The last verified earthquake of that magnitude was back in 1700. 2.7 earthquake here this morning. Again, just shy of the Cascadia mega thrust area. Now this region has been, let me show you guys the tremor map here tonight, or from yesterday. We only had about 10 epicenters. This region down here of the Cascadia, and the Cascadia as a whole, normally we'll see tremor activity. And let me show you what I mean by tremor activity. I'm going to pull up a little range here and show you guys a little segment between September 12th and November 11th, somewhere around there, of tremor total activity. This was back in 2021. We had about, this was just 18,000 epicenters. Just goes to show you the area of the Cascadia subduction zone where the tremor normally takes place. This is down into the subduction zone itself, about 35, 45 kilometers down there. And then further down is where we get the volcanic activity, right? You got the Juan de Fuca plate at the surface levels here of the oceanic crust, just subducting offshore. That goes down underneath the North American plate. Of course, the further you go down, then you get into some melting, and that's how you get these volcanoes stirring up here across the Cascades and the Northern California range. But this activity is upstream from the volcanoes. It has been awfully quiet here. Again, technically speaking, our last good-sized tremor event was October of last year. Since then, throughout the year, we've had some, but not a whole lot. No super elevated number. In fact, if we look here, this one shows over 32,000, but we're going over an extensive time period. But if you look here on this graph, once again, the higher the number, the higher the chart here, the more counts that are taking place there in terms of tremor. And we just really haven't seen it. I'm thinking that this is leaning towards that things are pretty well locked out here across the area. The tremor activity occurs because of further pressure and strain in the region, but also that does include adding strain and stress up at the subduction level itself, where it tends to build. But this is an interesting scenario or interesting event because the lack of tremor here. What does it mean? What does it tell us? It can't really mean that there's no pressure in the area. Obviously, we know there's no pressure, but there's not enough pressure or strain to continue that Juan de Fuca plate being subducted underneath the North American plate. So it's a little odd. I think all this tremor activity will give us a good lesson when we do see the big earthquake out here take place. I wasn't around 1700. There wasn't scientific equipment, seismograph stations, tremor monitoring. None of that was around. In fact, the tremor monitoring is fairly new. We can't go back that far. Obviously, it's a fairly new feature. But I think the tremor does play a part in hopefully predicting the next Cascadia megaquake out here. And right now, it's quiet. So does that tell us something? It's abnormally quiet compared to the years past when we've seen these intervals of elevated tremor on a regular occurrence, and now nothing. We got some, but nothing like what we had seen. So I think it plays a major part in hopefully predicting the next one out there. after this one happens, whenever it does. Could happen today, right now, tomorrow, 50 years, 100 years from now. Southern branch of the San Andreas Fault here, pretty quiet. A handful of smaller microquakes out here. A look at the 2.5 map and above. Well, it doesn't really show too much activity out here. That movement up here around the Cascadia, that's about it. Southern California, not really showing anything aside from some small microquakes. Now, last night, I forgot to check this, right? One would never know if there was earthquake activity, right? No earthquake activity at Yellowstone until you go to the Yellowstone map. Let me show you guys real quick what's going on. Last night had a pretty good uptick in earthquake activity for a short amount of time. I did do a little short on it following the update just to get the information out. But it's this area right here. Look at this. A couple hours, I would say, of some pretty good earthquake activity. Now, Yellowstone up here is famous for having these rapid type earthquakes that occur in a short amount of time frame, and there could be literally over 100 or so earthquakes in that little period that we seen last night. Since then, obviously, there's still some earthquake activity ongoing overnight and in the last couple hours, but this little period right here was a really sharp increase in earthquake activity for a short amount of time, and it looks like it's centered right around the Mary Lake area. That looks like where it's showing up the strongest here, just on the northern edge of the Yellowstone caldera. It is a supervolcano. A lot of people don't know that, but it is. And I'm not saying this would be anything to fear in terms of an eruption. Obviously, we would be seeing elevated GPS displacement and larger earthquake activity before this thing were even to be considered close to erupting. Yellowstone does see frequent earthquake swarms. This one's not a huge one, but it's a lot in a short amount of time frame. So I'm kind of curious to see how many earthquakes they put up on the map. It'll probably be tomorrow when they take a look at it. They, meaning the USGS, they don't show earthquake activity up here unless it's above 2.5, maybe even 3.0. So when they get in the office tomorrow morning, they'll go through it, find out the exact location, depth, and the magnitudes, and how many there were, and hopefully put this up on the map here for tomorrow. But one cannot really decipher how many earthquakes have taken place in that little period of increased activity. So there's that movement here around the Mary Lake, and then it looks like maybe another little separate swarm here around Maple Creek. That's going to be these little localized earthquakes that really didn't show up on the other stations. Well, they did, but just a little bit smaller as far as the signature. This is where the main sequence of a lot of earthquake activity took place, including here in the last couple hours. Notice how these are really sharp. You look at the station to the northwest, and you can barely see those three. So that tells me right there that this activity and this activity is localized to the Mary Lake area. And that separate earthquake activity that we're seeing overnight here around the Madison Creek area is localized to this area. And that movement is barely showing up here across the Mary Lake. So a couple different swarms going on here, back and forth. Again, not huge, but I'm pretty certain that those were all around 2.0 or below. I don't think we see anything above that. Otherwise, most of the time, if we get a 2.5 or a 3.0 or anything above that, we'll get a preliminary earthquake data report from the computer system, and that will be put out onto the U.S. Map here. But nothing came in. And, this is some older movement here from the 14th, a couple days ago, and the 10th. So we'll see what they put out here for tomorrow. Either way, a little bit of earthquake activity stirring up out there in Yellowstone National Park last night, and still a little bit this morning coming in. All right, let's see what else we got here across the world in terms of movement. Well, late last night, 5.7 coming in, right around this little horseshoe bend south of Vanuatu, south of the Port Vila area. There's a little trench that sits right here, but this is very shallow at the surface levels for that 5.7. looks like overnight we did see some further deeper movement here into the Fiji area. That one coming in 581 kilometers deep for 4.6. So that should amplify, if you think about it, that should amplify the conditions across this plate boundary. And I think we're already seeing that. Earlier this morning, we've seen a couple more earthquakes ramping up here around New Guinea. That should be the story today. We should follow that potentially for some further movement. The Earth did get hit last night, earlier this morning, with that CME, which sparked up the G1 storming conditions. We'll cover the space weather event here in a little bit, but I'm not noticing any elevated, like super elevated earthquake activity. Nothing above 6.0 here in the last 24 hours, and I've been trying to keep track of the relationship between space weather events and earthquake activity, right? Last time we've seen that G2, G3 storm hit the Earth, we've seen quite a bit of earthquake activity ramping up. In fact, that was, let's see if we can find that, the 7.6 there around the Philippines, 7.1 Vanuatu. A lot of this activity stirred up here in the in that time frame when the Earth got hit by that CME. So I do believe there's a relationship between them, but I'm trying to measure out the percentages of times when we see elevated activity, earthquake activity, along with space weather activity being elevated, and then the times that we don't see elevated activity, even when we have elevated space weather activity. So I can't really say that the 5.7 is related to that space weather event because the solar storm activity occurred after this time frame, after my time, midnight. So you can't really say, yeah, this 4-pointer is now associated with the space weather event that kicked up today. You can't really say that. We have to notice a noticeable difference when that space weather hits us. But a 5.7 can occur on any single day, regardless if there's space weather or not. So I'm going to discredit that theory today in terms of space weather activity along with earthquake activity being elevated. I just don't see it. I'm not seeing any unusual swarms, any elevated activity anymore. It's just typical deep movement here, followed up by shallow earthquake activity along the plate boundary, and that's just how the plate tectonics work here in the area. So that's one for the nay, right? Unless we see something really kick up here, but again, space weather we'll get to in a minute. That's long gone. It's that elevated activity stirred up early this morning. So we'll get to that here in a second. I want to cover the rest of the activity as far as earthquake movement goes. Some movement up here in Japan, 4.5, just right prior to the Japan trench from that's this morning time frame. But again, a 4.5, we can't really say that's in relation to the space weather because that's very common, considering Japan trench is very active almost on any given day. See what else we got. Let's look around the world. Some movement, a couple 4s up here in the Kuril Kamchatka. New Zealand not really showing anything down here right now. South America region, another active zone that's just active regardless if there's space weather or not. Quite a few 4s and deeper movement quakes into the Peru-Chile Trench. The Middle America Trench the same way. It's Texas is always having earthquake activity out there in the oil fields, and regardless if there's space weather activity going on. Not a whole lot going on through the Atlantic for now. Let's check out the big island of Hawaii out there. We've been watching some volcano potential. I'm not really seeing any earthquake swarming going on there. Let's go ahead and check out the latest information statement here from the hazard notification system. This is a really cool feature. You can get notified here in regards to volcano activity if it's if anything is being elevated out here. And as the status goes today, Kilauea volcano is currently not erupting, and it's the same thing, same exact statement here that we could see eruptive activity occur in the near future with little or no warning. That's due to the elevated inflation that's taken place here across the summit region. Let's check out that tilt meter, see what's going on here for the Hawaii volcano. This is the other site here that you can use to check out many different instruments, cameras, GPS, gas, infrasound, seismometer. There we go, tilt meter. And yeah, so we're going to go after the tilt meter, UWE, see what's going on. I noticed overnight when we last did our update, we're starting to mellow out, level out. And that's kind of where we're at right now still. And if you look at the back 30 days, and if we were to go back even further, we've seen these inflation trends followed up by at least a couple days here of deflation. And that's where we're at right now. Now, today's a pretty important date or point in this graph, because if we continue to go down, it's likely that we may not see it go back up, because all of these trends have been following one another here for the past couple months, with each inflation trend showing higher and higher amounts. So if it does go down or completely level out, not so certain that we're going to see this thing stir back up. But we'll watch this today and see if we break from that little pattern of deflation. You look at the lava lake area here real quick, see what we got. Beautiful day out there in the Big Island, I'm sure. Some clouds, high cirrus, and some cumulus clouds out there. Some stratus clouds, it looks like. Coastal moisture. Don't see any magma. I see volcanic gases, but that's very typical out there, right? Obviously, it is an active volcano, but there is no lava present. And these are not lava, or nor is it Planet X. All right? I see a lot of that going on Facebook and YouTube, and look, every time every date at this time right here, we always see the planet appear in the sky. Well, those are just optical reflections here from the sun hitting the lens. These are not in the sky. This is not on the ground. It's in the lens itself. Most people know it, but there's quite a few following out there that the Planet X, it's real. It's always appearing at this time in the day. Well, I'm not saying Planet X isn't real, but this is definitely not Planet X, nor anything else in the atmosphere, in the sun, in the sky, in the land. Reflections. I'm a photographer. I've been doing it for many, many years, and I hate these. The reason why is because they interfere sometimes. Even in the newer, nicer cameras and phones, if you get that in your picture, it kind of ruins it. So, no lava. That's not lava. No Planet X. What there is volcanic gases here, and they're typical spots that it has been here around the edges, and then certain cracks out here where the last fissure opens. The last fissure activity had opened up. All right, let's move on. Didn't want to get too far off track there. Go way out there. Anything else going on here? Iceland. Let's go up there and check that real quick, see what's going on here in Iceland. That's another area of potential volcanic activity. The latest update was put out this morning, and they're still thinking that there may be eruption, but this has gone on and on. You can say that there's going to be eruption, but things are all kind of pointing towards it not happening, at least around this area. They're still saying it's too early to make that statement, too early to say if magma accumulation has stopped at the Svartsengi area. And, I think it's safe to say for right now. Let's go check out the earthquake activity. That things are definitely calming down there. We got 87 earthquakes total in the last 12 hours. Yes, we're still seeing some earthquake activity out here around the Grindavik area, Hagafell, and the Slingarfell region, where that magma intrusion area has been taking place. There's a little 2.1 that occurring in 5 kilometers deep. What could trigger this potentially higher, or could raise the elevated potential for eruption, is a further increase in magma from below. It's possible that we did see some of the magma that has formed underneath the ground solidify in certain areas, and not without breaking through to the surface. But as they mentioned, it's still too early to close the book completely on this. I think it's still, as long as we have some elevated earthquake activity, there's still stuff going on down there. So we'll continue to watch that and check back on it. If anything were to change, we'll definitely jump on here. Mediterranean region, a couple earthquakes out there today. The Atlantic Ocean, aside from Iceland, microquake activity, it looks pretty quiet here for the rest of the Atlantic. And all right, so let's get into space weather activity here real quick. Make sure I got the latest information here from solarham.net. Is the site. There's a lot of different sites out there. I like using Kevin's site because it's simple layout, and all the links are there. If you want to check out the UV link, movies, SDO imagery, it'd take you to the official sites and whatnot. I'm sure he's got the links here somewhere. But we're looking at overnight. We've seen one of these is showing the G2 storm conditions, maybe even higher. But the majority of these that kicked up last night is into the G1, G2 category, and that was elevated there for a couple hours last night due to that CME that hit us, and I believe it's probably the one from that X flare from a couple days ago that hit. But we did have quite a few CMEs headed off towards the Earth, not directly, but we got a couple glancing blows here, and it did peak up there in the speed, density, plasma, and I'm not for sure how good the auroras were, but the KP index was elevated. Let me check something here real quick. 24-hour observed. It looks like maximum was at a G1 according to the Space Weather Prediction Center overnight. So it did peak up around the G1 class, which is the KP index of 5 right here. Anything above that, around 6, would be G2 and so on. But it looks like that was it. Again, I don't know how many people got to see the auroras. I went to bed last night. I just couldn't cover it anymore. I was pretty tired. So I guess there's the possibility of continued unsettled conditions here in terms of maybe seeing these overnight. I don't think so. I think that was it, but there's still always that possibility of seeing some unsettled conditions there across the higher latitudes where they're still calling maybe for a G1 or lower here over the next couple nights. Flaring activity, let's go ahead and check this out here real quick, see what we got. The culprit of the X flare is long gone. 3514 over there is no longer visible. We are left with, let's go ahead and check out the magnetogram of these sunspots. 3514 over here last night. Notice today that, let's go ahead and click on that. Well, we could barely still see portions of something over here. But that's pretty much out of sight, out of mind, out of view completely there. And we're left with a whole bunch of sunspots out here. None really that are impressive looking far as complexity. I guess maybe this region around here we'll watch in the coming days. Because these things can spark up and intensify and get super complex here pretty quickly. But as of right now, I'm really not seeing any significant flare threats out there from any of those sunspot regions. Still got 99% chance for a C flare, M flare 25, X flare has been dropped down to 5%. So that is all updated. And we'll just kind of watch and see how the sun wants to behave. But, as you've seen here, we did have some decent KP index there that slammed into the magnetosphere. And no elevated earthquake activity out here from that solar storm. So we'll watch. I'm going to be comparing this every single time we have a solar storm and see how it relates to earthquake activity. Definitely, this one is I would call this a nay, because nothing has been elevated here following that arrival of the solar storm last night. All right, let's move on and see what we got for the Storm Prediction Center here on Earth. Well, still looking at a slight risk of severe weather potential from that low pressure that's bringing up a bunch of rainfall and some wind out there across the eastern seaboard. Looking at the potential of a tornado threat along with that wind damage. Not really seeing anything for the hail category, but just tornado threat and wind out there around the North Carolina area and also the Virginia region. Thunderstorm activity potentially out here across the west coast. We are looking at our First in a series of low pressure systems that are going to be hitting the California region with some much needed rainfall. So we got a chance of thunderstorms here today and tomorrow from that low pressure spinning offshore. That's going to stick around, I think, for the majority, almost the majority of this coming week for California. And then we got some more storms behind that. This one here looks like a pretty good dandy of a storm with impressive rainfall and snowfall rates there as we head into the end of the year and the beginning of 2024. Check out this total accumulated precipitation amount out here. Now this goes to the 2nd of January 2024 and still looking pretty decent for rainfall out here across the west coast. Looking at upwards maybe 5-6 inches of rainfall here across the Sacramento Valley, less down in the San Joaquin Valley, portions of it anyway. But Southern California is going to get some decent rain as well. But Northern California looks to be the area of the target in terms of the maximum precipitation accumulation area. So I'm ready. I'm looking forward to it. I just put a 17-pound brisket on the smoker. So that's good. Well, I did that about an hour or so ago. So with a little bit of chances of rain and thunderstorms coming in, it makes for a perfect day to barbecue. At least in my eyes, I enjoy barbecuing in the rain and the wind. There's our low pressure system out here spinning offshore. It's going to be pulling up a lot of substantial moisture here from the south. And it's kind of a warmer storm, so these snow levels are going to be around 8,000 feet. But for the folks that do get snow way up there, it'll probably be a lot. Looking at the radar satellite imagery here, it does show a band of rain just coming into my neck of the woods here outside of Chico, California. And that will be the potential convective line of storms out here today if we get any thunderstorm activity. I'm really not seeing any lightning showing up on the map. Far as the potential CAPE values out here, they're not that high. We don't have a lot of instability in the air, but there's at least that chance tonight. Offshore, definitely. Goodness, look at those potential CAPE values. And that will work its way inland slightly, but California is not really set up this time of year for thunderstorms, but you never know. Either way, we got some decent rainfall coming, and we'll continue to watch that and report back on anything that takes place. Let's see what else we got here as far as the seismograph stations go. Looks pretty quiet across the board for now. Not seeing anything elevated. That includes all regions. So we'll keep an eye on that. Maybe we'll, I don't know. I'm definitely leaning towards the solar weather and earthquake uptick relation. I've seen it in the past, and we've measured it quite a bit here. But this is just one of those times. Maybe it just wasn't strong enough to create earthquakes, right? So we'll check out the next one. There's still earthquake activity occurring, but that's all the time, right? Plate tectonics is always in motion, building up strain, releasing strain, moving around. A lot of stuff going on 24/7, regardless if there's space weather or not. We'll check on the next space weather event, see how it compares, right? But for now, just kind of a typical day out there on this planet. I'm going to go out, continue to watch my brisket, and hope everyone has a good day. I'll post up a video here for the members. That way you guys can see what's going on here in my neck of the woods. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later tonight. Take care, folks.